Happy Independence Day. So excited to be here. And actually yesterday, last night, I saw Lori Palatnik, the founder of Momentum, lighting a torch at the main ceremony of Independence Day in Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. And it was very, very exciting. Until only a few years ago, nobody could even imagine that a Jew from Canada, States, who's not a resident of the State of Israel, would light a torch on Mount Herzl on the main ceremony of the Independence Day of the State of Israel. I have to understand this is the most important ceremony of the day. And obviously it was given to Israelis who contributed the most to the State of Israel. And until recently, only Israelis did that. So what changed? What brought that change? Before I answer that question, I would like you, if anybody can write at the chat down there, the first word that comes into your mind when you hear the name Israel, the State of Israel. Just write one word. I'm waiting. Homes, Jews, pride, love. Okay, thank you for sharing. And obviously all these words, unity, homeland, love, also I guess you would say Judaism, holiness, maybe some people will say, conflicts and other words. But before all these true ideas, when we think about Israel, I think that Israel is first the people of Israel. The people who live in Israel, create and made Israel what it is. When I guide groups in Israel, like I guide Momentum groups, I ask the participants to speak to people in the street, people in the shops, in the hotels, because only when you talk to the people, you could really experience and understand Israel and the Israeli spirit. In our short conversation here, I would like to focus on one person, probably the Israeli who influenced the most on the State of Israel and one of the most famous Jews in world history. I guess you can guess what I'm talking about David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel. Alison, can you put the first slide? First picture? Yeah. Ooh. That's our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion. That's on his head. Next one. And why is he standing on his head? Oh, that's a better one. Why was he standing on his head? You might be surprised, but there is a reason for that. But I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it. Now, David Ben-Gurion, of course, if you want to learn about him, his history, his biography, you don't need me. You have enough books and articles. I would like to focus on his actions around the time of the establishment of the State of Israel and how these actions actually shaped the State of Israel and influenced Israel and impact Israel until today. Well, just one word about political sociology. They define several kinds of leaders, which the most rare leaders among them is what they call transforming leaders. These are leaders who take their vision of how the society and the state should be formed and function, and they implant that vision in the citizens, make them believe that they have to be part of that. Who do you think could be these kind of leaders? I guess George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, obviously, Mahatma Gandhi. I believe that also Ben-Gurion belongs to this group of leaders. And I hope that in a few minutes you'll also realize why. Next slide, Alison. Yeah. So I guess many of us recognize this famous picture from the declaration, the ceremony of the State of Israel. That ceremony took place today, 72 years ago, in Tel Aviv. By the way, at the end of the ceremony, all the leaders signed the script. It was empty. The scroll that the declaration was written on was actually empty. And the text was written only later. Do you have any idea why? Actually, why the ceremony took place in Tel Aviv and not in Jerusalem, the historical holy city, Jerusalem. And we have to remember that the ceremony took place in the middle of the War of Independence, and Jerusalem was under siege, and the Jordanian Legion attacked Jerusalem from the east, and the Egyptian army from the south, escorted by local Arabs from the region. It was impossible to get to Jerusalem, and most of the leadership was in Tel Aviv, and that's why the ceremony took place in Tel Aviv, in this room that you're looking at. Part of the people who signed, the leaders who signed the Declared Independence, actually were in Jerusalem under siege, and they listened to the ceremony on radio, like with all the people of Israel. The hall you're looking at right now was chosen for a very specific reason. This is a hall that is located in the first house of Tel Aviv, the house that was used by the first mayor of Tel Aviv, Mayor Dizengoff. Yes, the same person of the famous street, Dizengoff. And his house became, after he died, passed away in the 1930s, it became the Art Museum of Tel Aviv. And as the Art Museum, it had a big hall. So we have now a big hall to use for the ceremony, but there's another very important reason. If you look at the picture, on the top, you can see the photo of Theodor Herzl, who was the visionary of the founder of the Zionist movement. And you can see that behind it, you have the windows. The windows are very high up. And why is it? And because the hall was built partly underground when they built the house. And since the Egyptians were bombing Tel Aviv by airstrikes, you had to keep the safety of all the leaders of the state of Israel. So the hall was actually a kind of a shelter. If you think about it, the state of Israel was born in a shelter. That maybe explains a few things about Israel. Okay, we can end the slide. Okay, in the end of the ceremony, they sang for the first time the Israeli anthem, the Tikva, as the official anthem of the state of Israel. And in the middle of that, in the end of the ceremony, the music came from heaven. Now, what do I mean came from heaven? The participants of the ceremony didn't understand where it comes from, but the reason that the music came from heaven is because they had the orchestra, the Philharmonic Orchestra was brought to play the Tikva, the anthem, but there was no room for the orchestra. So they put them on the second floor, and when they played, it felt like the music is coming down from heaven. Now, to avoid the airstrike of Tel Aviv, in the middle of the ceremony, all the participants, just about 350 people, were asked to keep it in secret. Yes, right. Asking a few hundred Jews to keep a secret. This photo you're looking at right now is the people, thousands of people of Tel Aviv gathering outside that Independence Hall because they all heard about it. Everybody heard that they're going to declare the state of Israel. But for a miracle, I don't know if it's a miracle, but the enemy didn't know, and Tel Aviv wasn't bombarded that day. Okay, you can end the slide and come back to me. And now, come to me. Yes, so I said that the leaders were assigned an empty scroll. Well, Ben-Gurion was reading from draft because the version of the Declare of the Independence, of course, took many debates to decide which kind of version we should read in. And all the parties, socialists, capitalists, religious, non-religious, they all debated until they got to agree on a specific version, and that's what they signed on. Now, I said before that all the ceremony took place in the middle of a war, the War of Independence. Do you know how many people, how big was the population of Israel during the war when Israel was established? We're talking just over 600,000 men, women, and children. 600,000 Jews. That's all we had in Israel, fighting 5 big, proper armies of the Arab countries around us. They had proper armies, and we had, listen to that, we had about 3 airplanes, 2 tanks, no battleships, no submarines. How do you win a war like that? How do you start a war like that? So not just that you didn't have a proper army, but also the head of the State of Israel and the head of the Defense Ministry, David Ben-Gurion, was a man that all his military background comes up to being a sergeant in the Canadian Army in the First World War. And even then, he was never sent to the front line. So he didn't have much of experience. Ben-Gurion knew his disadvantages, but he also knew his advantages. He was a self-taught person, very diligent. He read lots of literature about military literature. He consulted with many, many experts. He had actually veterans from the Second World War, American officers who came to advise him. The most famous one was Colonel Mickey Stone, who came from, he was from a Jew from America, American Jew who served in the Second World War. And he came to Israel and he helped to establish the young IDF. If you want to learn more about him, there's a great movie was produced in Hollywood called Cast a Giant Shadow. You should watch it. Actually, the actor was Kirk Douglas, who passed away only a few months ago. So I said that Ben-Gurion laid the foundation for the outlook, the philosophy of the Israeli army until today, and which have few very basic outlooks, such as moving the battle zone to the enemy area as quick as possible, and maneuvering, of course, forces from place to place. One of the consequences of that philosophy, you can see in each one of Israeli wars, like the Sinai campaign, 6-Day War, even the Yom Kippur War, 1973, which Israel was taken by surprise by 2 mighty armies, Egyptian and Syrian armies. But in 3 days, we managed to stop those 2 armies. And in less than 2 weeks, we pushed them to behind the lines, and we got to less than 60 miles from Cairo and just about 25 miles from Damascus. And that's when the war ended. Also, one of the most important parts of Ben-Gurion with the Israeli army, the IDF, forming the IDF as the people's army model, where every citizen, when he comes to the age of 18, is obligated to serve in the army. It creates a situation of everybody is part of defending our country. And of course, it's very important that everybody can serve later on as a soldier in the army reserves in case of a war, any kind of crisis. I think there's another, in my opinion, there's another a very positive input is that Israeli youth in a very young stage of their life, they learn what is responsibility and discipline. Another critical part of that philosophy of Ben-Gurion, the concept of security of Israel, is keeping the technological advance against the countries that surround us. And some of them are very advanced countries, such as Iran, but quite a challenge today of the Israeli intelligence. We also say that Ben-Gurion established this factory, secret factory in the south side of Israel, manufacturing something that we're not allowed to talk about. So we're not going to talk about it. No, but anyway, we have to say something. So people say, I mean, the media say that Israel has nuclear weapon. I don't know if it has or doesn't have, but I know that Israel believes in a method called the nuclear ambiguity, which actually says it doesn't matter if we have nuclear weapons or don't. What does matter is that our enemies believe that we have. That policy probably made sure that there was no wars, well, big wars in between Israel and its neighbors for the last 40 years. But saying all that, and I'm ending now this army part, I think personally that having a strong army, technological army, and all of that is not enough. The most important part is the soldiers, and the soldiers should be motivated. Motivation is the #1 goal you should have in every army. And I want to share with you a private story. About 5 years ago, when I was a soldier, I served for about half of my service, a year and a half, in Lebanon, fighting the terror organization Hezbollah. I remember one night, me and my soldier friends and I were sent to set a ambush in this little stream in Lebanon, where we thought that some Hezbollah terrorists might come and attack the kibbutzim in the north part of Israel. So we were in Lebanon, a few miles to the north of the border. It was a very cold night, I remember, and we were lying down there, and it was cold, and we were tired, felt pretty miserable. We were feeling sorry for ourselves. And, we would rather be in a nice warm bed than lying down there in the field. But then I remember looking behind my shoulder, and I saw the lights of all these kibbutzim in the north part of Israel, just next to the border, kibbutz Dan, Dafna, in the north part of Israel. And I knew that because of my friends and I lying down there in the middle of the night, protecting them, the children in those kibbutzim could play soccer in the backyard, can watch television at home, live a normal life like every child should live. We didn't need any kind of a motivation talk. We knew exactly what we're doing there. Another aspect I want to share with you about a wonder of Israel is, I said Ben-Gurion established the state of Israel, so we have the regime, and Israel was established by a community of people who immigrated to Israel. Where did they come, all these ideas? Most of them came from Eastern Europe, from countries were totalitarian, communist, and they established a state in this region, Middle East, no democracy around here, but still we established a democratic, Western democratic country here in the Middle East. And although we had lots of shocks, the parliament, the government, the Supreme Court, each one keeps its own power and the checks and balances that are crucial for a democratic state. And how come? How come from people who came from communist and totalitarian countries formed a democratic country? I don't know if I have a perfect answer for that, but maybe it's because the Jewish tradition, Jews lived in communities in Eastern Europe, and they voted that committees. The rabbi was voted, and if you didn't like the rabbi, you could vote him out. So there was some kind of a democracy among the Jewish communities, and maybe they brought that legacy here to Israel. Also, as a nation who was suffered from this discrimination for the last 2,000 years, we were taught the great value of equality, and maybe we carry it since we left Egypt 3,000 years ago, and we believe that should be one of our main issues here in Israel. Of course, equality between men and women. If you look at pictures from the early Congress, Zionist Congress in the early 20th century, you can see that women were part of that Congress. And of course, Israel had the first prime minister already 50 years ago, way before other Western countries in the world. And of course, I'm talking about Golda Meir, who was from America. 2 words about economics. I said that Israel was actually established by socialists. It's a big issue, I know, in the United States. I'm not going to go into it, but socialism was the beginning of the state. But of course, today, Israel is very, very capitalist. But we still have some socialist boundaries here. You have to understand, Israel has almost no natural resources, except the gas that was found lately in the Mediterranean Sea. But what we had is agriculture. But agriculture, without lots of land to grow it on, because Israel is a small state, which reminds me a story of this Israeli farmer went to his friend in Texas, another farmer in Texas, and this Texan farmer takes him to his huge fields, and he tells him, if you're going to my truck and in Texas and we drive on my fields, we won't get to the end of my fields by the end of the day. So the Israeli farmer says, oh yeah, I have a truck like that. So yeah, we have small lands here. We don't know what is having this huge endless land. So what we do, we try to get as much craft as we can from the small land. We can put up the next slide of the palm trees, as you can see, we saw before, Alison. So let's see, yeah. So why do I put the palm trees? Because Israel is the biggest export of palm trees, of dates in the world. Just to compare, if you take an acre of palm trees here in Israel and you compare it to any kind of orchard around the Middle East, let's say, for instance, you get from every acre in Israel 18 times as much dates from anywhere else. So we are the biggest export in the world of dates. Besides that, of course, we have, you all heard about the dripping irrigation that was invented in 3 kibbutzim in Israel. Even the wine in Israel, that until 30 years ago, when you spoke about Israeli wine, you spoke about this Kiddush wine, you know, Manischewitz style, not highly recommended. And today, lots of wineries in Israel win all kinds of gold medals in contests around the world, and we are pretty proud of our wine. Of course, today, #1 export is technology. Yeah, we're talking today is the dream of the Jewish mother is maybe not as much as like the past of a son being a lawyer, but maybe being a computer science. And Israel is the #1 startup per capita in the world and one of the leading worlds in technology. I want one last thing. Ben-Gurion and the other leaders of the people that established the state of Israel saw the state of Israel not only of the state of the citizens of Israel, but as the Jewish state, the state of all the Jews in all around the world. Already in 1950, they passed the law in the Israeli parliament, the law of return, that gave the right for every Jew in the world, the right to come and live, who is interested to come and live in Israel, can become immediately a citizen in Israel. And Israel, already from the beginning, we made sure to bring, to help immigrants from all around the world, especially from the Arab world that were persecuted there to come and live in Israel. Had already in 1949, 1950, straight after Israel was established, all kind of operations to bring Jews to come and live here in Israel. One of the most famous operations was on eagle wings. Next slide, Alison. These are Yemenite Jews. And the Yemenite Jews we had to bring them very, very quickly to Israel, because if the Muslim regime in Yemen would know that the Jews are coming to Israel, it would be pretty bad. So we sent El Al airplanes, of course, without the flag at the tail, and gathered very quickly the Jews from all the villages and cities, brought them to the airfield, and told them very quickly you have to go on the airplane. But there was one problem. Many of these Yemenite Jews lived in small villages and they never ever saw an airplane. How can you persuade a person to go on this metal monster that goes into the sky? Well, there was no time to start and explaining, so they said, we'll just tell them to go on. And they told these Jews, go on the airplanes, and they just did. They went on the airplanes and they sat in the seats. After the airplanes took off, one of the officials from the Jewish agency asked one of the leaders of these Yemenite Jews, aren't you afraid? And he said, what do you mean afraid? For 2,000 years, we're reading in the Torah that God is going to collect us from 4 corners of the earth and bring us to the land of Israel on eagle wings. That's what it says in the Torah. And yeah, these are the eagle wings. These are the eagle wings. Doesn't matter if it's eagles that made from metal, from steel. We're not arguing as long as it brings us to the land of Israel. And in 18 years, Israel doubled its numbers. 18 months, sorry, not in 18 years. In 18 months, Israel managed to double the population, no equivalent of that to the world. And in a few years, we received to Israel Jews from 100 different countries in the world. So actually, most of the people of Israel were actually new immigrants, if you think about it. Also, in the last few decades, we had lots of immigrants coming to Israel, most lately from, well, of course, we had from Russia and from Ethiopia, but now from Western Europe because of the anti-Semitism. we're getting a lot of new immigrants from them. Because as I said, Israel sees itself as this land of all the Jews, taking also with care of the welfare of the Jews all around the world, not only by ourselves, of course, we've helped with American Jews who help a lot also with taking care of Jews all around the world. Well, because we learned, our painful history taught us that if we don't take care of ourselves, no one else will. I just want to share one last story, is maybe to show us what it actually means, this care of Jews from all around the world. Is just over 40 years ago, an airplane was hijacked. If you all heard about the Entebbe operation, when an airplane was hijacked in the 4th of July, 1976, to Uganda, separating Jews from non-Jews and telling the state of Israel that if they won't release Palestinian territories, they'll go on and kill the hostages, the Jewish hostages, one by one. These were terrorists, Palestinian and German terrorists together. Israel sent an elite unit from the army 2,000 miles away from the coast of Israel by airplanes in the middle of the night to rescue those Jews, because the world condemned, of course, that hijack, but did nothing. And Israel decided we have to take care of ourselves, and we sent that elite unit, rescuing over 100 hostages, losing 4 hostages were killed in the middle of the battle, and the commander of the elite unit, his name was Yoni Netanyahu, is actually the brother of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that operation maybe said it's out and loud to the world, but Israel won't be under any other country mercy, and Jewish blood is precious. And maybe the most recent example for the connection, the bond between the Jews in Israel and Jews in the world is the ceremony last night in Mount Herzl in Jerusalem, I mentioned before, when the honor was given to Lori Palatnik, the founder of Momentum. And Lori established this amazing organization that bond the connection between mothers all around the world and the mothers in Israel, a bond that shows that Israel belongs to the Jews in the world, and the Jews in the world are connected to the state of Israel. And only when we are united together, unity and not uniformity, only when we are united together, so miracles and wonders like the state of Israel will be part of our lives. And from here, even the sky is not the limit. So happy Independence Day, everybody.